You can absolutely get stronger, get toned without necessarily getting bigger. So before you jump into Pilates, before you give up on lifting entirely, by the time you watch this video, you're going to have full clarity of how you can get to the type of body goal you want without feeling like you need to A, bulk, or B, just the fear of getting bigger. So diving straight into probably if I'm ranking it at the most important, we're going to go into nutrition first. The reason being is that how you eat is going to be the result of how your body is going to look. If you don't want to get bigger, then stay far from being in a calorie surplus. I always recommend working with a coach before you go into a surplus, because if you were to go on TDEE or any type of calorie calculator, they're going to tell you right away, like, oh, just eat 500 over your maintenance. So then that's exactly what people do. Is that necessarily wrong? No, but the thing is that you don't have to go into a 500 calorie surplus. And I think the biggest thing that women or anybody in general skip out on is that you can still build muscle even in maintenance. This is actually an example from me from last year. I really didn't want to get, I guess, bigger is the quote, but I still wanted to keep building and maintaining the muscle that I have. And even to this day, I think I'm at a pretty good size. I have no intentions to get bigger. So my goal is just to stay in maintenance. So for this entire duration, I was eating what my maintenance calories were. And honestly, I prefer not to share that type of information, because I feel like when people look at a certain body type, they look at their biometrics, they think like, okay, we're the same height, we're the same weight, that's exactly how many calories I should eat because it worked for her. And that it's not you, great. I made that mistake where I found an influencer who was the same height as me. She was, I think, just 5 pounds more than me. But because we have different goals at that time, like I actually wanted to grow, she was trying to maintain. I was eating the calories that she was eating, and that ended up being way too little for me. It's the idea of like, okay, but if it worked for her, it'll work for me. And that's not always the case. So I'm not going to exactly share what my maintenance calories were, but just know that it is possible. And if you are somebody who's just starting out on their journey, they have no intentions to get bigger, they just want to change the way that they look, change the shape, then I would absolutely just recommend stay in maintenance. And I know maintenance can be a scary thing because you're really not gaining weight, but you're also not losing weight. But I feel like that's a superpower in itself. A lot of people talk about how you can lose weight, how you can gain weight. But once you get to that desired goal, then it's really hard for people to maintain, because that's something that is never taught. And if you don't know what your maintenance calories are, you can just follow the instructions that I put up here. Keep in mind that this is all just an estimate. There's no way to truly know from these calorie calculators. But what I will recommend is that you track your weight every day for 2 weeks. This is in the morning, before you eat, before you drink water, after you use the bathroom, you know, whether you got number 1, number 2, and track your weight for 2 weeks. You're going to see a lot of fluctuating trends. You might find that one day was way heavier than the other. That's fine. That's not what we're worried about. You're then going to go onto an Excel spreadsheet or just somewhere where you can track this. I prefer Excel spreadsheet because I got way too much information on the notes app of my iPhone. But how I did it was exactly like this. I just figured out the little tiny trends. I would take the average of the 7 days, and that would be my week 1. When I then completed week 2, I'm now seeing the idea of like, am I losing altogether, or am I gaining altogether, or if it completely stayed the same, then I know I'm in maintenance. I didn't change anything in the diet. You don't necessarily have to either. But if you find that in the trend you were gaining or maybe even losing weight, then that kind of tells you an idea of your nutrition, whether you need to cut back on some calories, maybe add more calories. This is pretty much the most accurate way you can measure whether or not you're in maintenance. The good thing that calorie calculators can do is give you an estimate. Let's say the estimated calories was 2,000. So that's how much you're eating in the day. That's how much you're tracking. And if you found in the average of those 2 weeks you were losing weight, then it means that 2,000 is not your maintenance. So then the next week you could try eating 2,100 calories. But if the opposite happened and you saw that there was a slight jump, like 0.3 or more, then it means you're eating in a slight surplus. You may just need to decrease your calories just a smidge, but that's the first thing, is just stay in maintenance. Or if you do have a lot of weight that you're trying to lose, like 10, 20 pounds, then you could go into a slight surplus. So once you find your baseline of what your maintenance calories are, then simply just subtract 100 and stick with that for like 3 weeks. And in those 3 weeks is what we're going to get into next about your training. Okay, so this is how your training is going to look. You're just going to focus on compound exercises. I don't just mean like squats and deadlifts, but it's all the exercises that build overall functional strength. This does not include isolation exercises. So if you're trying to, let's say, strengthen your upper body, but you don't want to get bigger, then don't do exercises like bicep curls, tricep isolation movements, bicep isolation. Those are all things just targeted to one specific muscle. The more you work it, the more it's going to eventually grow. But let's say you're trying to aim for the Pilates arm look, which is simply just rounded shoulder, maybe a little bit of bicep tricep action happening, but that can all still be built through compound movement. So for upper body, this could look like pull-up variations if you can't do a pull-up, push-ups or push-up variations if you still can't do a bodyweight push-up. Also row variations like barbell rows, dumbbell rows, bench press variations. If you don't like actual bench press, you can do dumbbells. These are all movements that require overall use of your lats, of your chest, because the stronger you can make those two muscles, the easier it is for your arms to move. Because if you think about it, if you're trying to pick up something from the floor, your biceps and triceps are not the main muscles that help you do that, but rather it's your back, your core, and a little bit of your chest. Same thing with legs. It could be RDL variations. It could be squat variations. Not necessarily like a barbell squat, but you could even get away with like a hack squat. Because if you're doing a hack squat to the full range of motion, you're actually not just using your quads, you are using your hamstrings and your glutes at the bottom position. There is a difference between hypertrophy movements and strength movements. Yes, you absolutely could combine both if you want, but if the goal is not to necessarily look big, you probably want to stray away from the hypertrophy and focus more on compounds. You can still build some muscle in compound movements, but it's not to the extent of giant biceps within a year. Now, the next question comes up is how you need to be training these compound movements, and that's where we're going to go into intensity. Now, you might have heard the terms intensity and volume, how you can kind of think about differentiating both of them. I'm going to use the examples of grocery bags, you bringing in groceries from your car into your home. The intensity is how heavy those grocery bags are. This is the case where you're able to carry all of them in two hands, even though you are struggling, even though it's hard. You're trying to prevent taking 2 trips from your car to your house. They're really, really heavy, but you only made 1 trip. That's how you can think of intensity. Now, volume, on the other hand, is being able to carry a lot of bags, maybe not as much as the first trip, but still enough where it's heavy and you're taking multiple trips. So let's say you had 8 bags in total. Intensity would be that you carried all 8 bags from your car to your home. Now, volume is you took 2 or 3 bags per trip and you kept repeating that over and over. That would be volume. Both will get you stronger, but they are different paths you can take when it comes to your training. When you're more strength focused, you're focused on just the intensity. You're focused on taking as many bags as you can so you only make 1 trip. They tend to be more mid reps, like 4 to maybe 8, but you are going heavy in those. Like I'm talking, you cannot walk after the first, maybe even 2 sets. However, hypertrophy, which is building muscle, like you're trying to isolate all of the smaller muscle groups like your biceps, triceps, hamstring, those typically require a little bit more volume, but not as high intensity. And the reason being is that those smaller muscle groups cannot take that much intensity. Let's go with the example of your delt. If you've ever tried to do lateral raises, whether it's the cable or dumbbells, you find that you could do definitely 10 reps, let's say with a lighter weight, but if you jump even by 2 to 5 pounds, you cannot even complete 4, maybe 5 reps at most. So that's why for the smaller muscle groups, if you're really trying to work towards hypertrophy, those tend to be higher reps, but also smaller weights. And you do multiple grocery trips with those smaller muscle groups, if that is something you're trying to grow. But in this case, because we're not, you just have to stick with the high intensity compound movement. And I just want to clarify again that just because you're focusing on compound movements, it doesn't mean that you're completely neglecting your biceps, your triceps, your shoulder muscles. Because when you do these compound movements, it requires all of those muscle groups to be able to move that weight. So for example, in a bench press, a lot of people think like, oh, it's just chest work. But no, it is shoulder, it is tricep, maybe even a little bit of bicep depending on the grip. Same thing with squats. A lot of people think that it's just a quad-based movement, but for a lot of people, they stop right at parallel. And when you stop at parallel, that's going to be a little bit more quad focused. But if you get more, if you were to work on your mobility, if you were to get deeper depth in your squats and go even below those 90 degrees, your hamstrings are now at work, your glutes are even at more work at the bottom position. And what drives it up is the glutes. What helps drive you down, control, are the quads. So all your muscles are still being worked. It's just not that typical split of chest one day, arms another day, all that. You don't need all that. You can even get away with just working out 2 days a week with doing an upper body focus day and a lower body focus day, and you will still not get big, so long as that your nutrition is good, you're not eating in a surplus, you're focusing on compound movements, and you're focusing more on intensity over the volume. Now, yes, there are some cases where you can still grow even at a high intensity over low volume, but that's a different video for another day to get into. If you're a beginner, just start there. Or even if you're an intermediate and you're just not liking how your body is looking, and I promise you, you're not going to get big. Hopefully this video kind of cleared it up for you and you have a little bit more clarity about how to go about your training, how to go about your nutrition. Hopefully you give lifting another chance before you completely jump ship and try to do something like Pilates. So if this video was absolutely helpful, please leave a like and I will see you in the next video.